My name is Thomas. I'm 28 years old today, but the story I want to share began when I was 24. At that time, my life seemed to follow the path many expect. I was studying law at one of the most traditional universities in the country, and my parents were almost suffocatingly proud of this. I was always the promising son, the one who never caused any trouble, who got good grades, who seemed to have everything under control. But what no one saw, not even me for a while, was that I was suffocating by a script I never chose. I woke up every day with a weight on my chest, pretending to be fine, smiling at teachers, classmates, and family, while inside I was already sinking. The turning point began quietly. I started skipping classes, but I said it was because of internships. I spent more time on my laptop, not to study, but to work on a technology project I'd been developing in secret. A startup born from my passion for solving real-world problems with digital tools. That was where I felt alive. But balancing both lives was unsustainable. Fatigue mounted, anxiety attacks intensified, and I began to withdraw from people. My parents noticed, of course, but they always assumed it was just normal course pressure. I never had the courage to tell them the truth. I hated law, and more than that, I'd already made the decision to drop out. I remember exactly the day I went to the college office to officially withdraw. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding. It was as if I were committing a crime against everything my family had dreamed for me. When I signed the papers, I felt immediate relief, but also paralyzing fear. That same day, I sat down with my parents and told them. I wanted to believe they would understand, that they would see how important this was to me. But what I received were looks of disappointment, accusations, and worst of all, silence from my mother. My father told me I was throwing my life away, that it was a phase, that I would regret it, and finally, that from that moment on, I could no longer count on them. That night was an abyss. I locked myself in my tiny room, now completely alone. They had been clear. Either I went back to school or I would fend for myself. I chose to fend for myself. With some money saved from freelance work and a previous internship, I rented a small studio and dove headfirst into the startup. But the euphoria of freedom soon gave way to a harsh reality. The company was still an idea, the product was still in testing, and the bills weren't waiting. I spent weeks eating instant noodles and sharing my bed with spreadsheets. I slept poorly, woke up with doubts, and with every ignored message from investors, a part of me wondered if my parents were right. What if I had really done everything wrong? There was one night in particular that stuck with me. It was a Tuesday, I think, and I'd spent the entire day trying to fix a bug that was crashing the entire platform. After hours of staring at the code, nothing made sense. I closed my laptop, lay down on the cold studio floor, and started to cry. I cried like a child, not just from sadness, but from exhaustion, from frustration, from feeling like a failure. I remembered my father's voice telling me I was impulsive, that I had no structure for real life. The pain wasn't just emotional, it was physical. My chest ached. For the first time, I wondered if I should call and apologize, beg to come back. But something inside me said, just a little longer, Thomas. Hold on a little longer. It was at that moment, amidst tears and silence, that I had the first idea that truly seemed to have a future. It wasn't anything grand, but it was functional, simple, and to the point. Instead of pursuing an overly large project, I began building a leaner version, focused on a single, specific problem in a niche I knew well: small content creators without access to automation tools. I worked like crazy for 2 weeks. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't go out for anything. Every line of code was a mixture of desperation and hope. And when I launched the beta version, afraid not a single soul would be interested, the first users appeared. They were few, but real. People who wrote in saying, "This has helped me a lot." It was then that I felt that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as lost as I thought. Over time, the platform began to grow slowly. almost imperceptibly, but each small step forward was a cry of victory. A new user, a positive piece of feedback, an organic mention on a forum. I celebrated everything as if I'd won a prize, but at the same time the pressure mounted. I had to cover server costs, deal with support, fix bugs, and still survive. I sold my only video game, sold a sentimental coat, and began eating only rice, eggs, and coffee. The truth is, even with the small signs of progress, I was always on edge. 1 month my rent was late, and the landlord left me a note threatening eviction. I seriously considered giving up. Right then and there. The shame of failing again seemed greater than any dream, but something inside me kept telling me I couldn't stop. And that inner voice gained strength when a mid-level influencer discovered the platform and shared it with his followers. Overnight, traffic exploded. The site went offline due to excessive traffic, and for the first time, I laughed at my own chaos. I quickly fixed the server and spent the next 3 days up and down, answering questions, fixing bugs, and, most importantly, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. I, the guy who'd been called irresponsible and a dreamer, was starting to create something that made a real difference in people's lives. And the craziest thing was, no one in my family knew about it yet. It was as if I was living 2 lives, one invisible and one quietly beginning to blossom. Despite my growth, fear still lingered within me. Every morning when I opened my computer, I expected to find some irreversible disaster, perhaps a security breach, a sudden drop in traffic, or a devastating comment from someone important. And more than that, there was a heavy burden of not being able to share any of this with my family. They still believed I was a failure, someone who had wasted a golden opportunity. I found myself rehearsing mental speeches about how to tell the truth, but in the end, I froze. Something inside me told me it wasn't enough to tell them. I needed to prove it, prove them wrong about me, that I wasn't a lost cause. This need for validation both ate at me and drove me. The turning point came unexpectedly. I received an email from an international company interested in purchasing the platform. At first, I thought it was a scam, but after a few meetings, I realized it was real. The price offered was surreal, something I never would have imagined achieving in such a short time. And even with my enthusiasm, I cried alone in the bathroom of the co-working space where I was secretly working, not because of the money, but because I realized how much I had endured in silence. There were sleepless nights, skipped meals, constant doubts, fear, loneliness, and yet I followed through. Even before signing the contract, I felt that in a way, I had already won. I signed the contract on a Thursday afternoon, my hands shaking and my heart racing. It had been weeks of negotiation, auditing, adjustments, and suddenly, there I was, selling my creation for 22 million raise. I sat on the bench in the square in front of the building, watching the people rush by, and I felt invisible. No one there knew what I had just done. There was no applause, no one waiting with champagne. Just me, my phone without notifications, and a strange feeling of emptiness. It wasn't sadness. It was a mixture of relief and the realization that, even after the victory, there was still a hole inside me. I realized it wasn't just about the money. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be recognized, especially by those who called me a failure. That's when I decided it was time to face it all. I called my parents the following weekend and asked them to come to dinner with me. I booked a discreet but elegant restaurant and brought an envelope with the sales contract just in case. They came with the same distant demeanor as always. We made small talk for a while, until my father, perhaps without realizing it, blurted out, "You still have time to go back to college, you know? It's never too late to right your wrongs." That cut me short. I took a deep breath, took the envelope from my backpack and placed it on the table, calmly opening it in front of them. I said nothing. I just pushed it toward my father. He read it, frowning. My mother leaned over his shoulder, trying to understand. The silence was absolute. For a few seconds, no one said a word. I could hear the clatter of silverware from other tables in the background, as if time had stopped right there at our table. My father reread the document twice before looking up at me. "Is this true?" he asked, with a tone somewhere between incredulity and pride he'd never quite managed to express. My mother remained silent, and I could see her eyes beginning to shine, not with emotion but with shock. It was at that moment that I realized I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to throw anything in their faces. I just wanted them to finally see me for who I was, as someone who had accomplished something great, even if they didn't follow the script they expected of me. They tried to react, each in their own way. My father tried to spark a conversation about the tech market, asking if I was considering investing the money. My mother said something about how I'd always been really smart with computers, but none of it rang true. It felt more like a desperate attempt to regain control of the narrative, and for the first time I didn't let them. I calmly told them that I didn't want this dinner to be an apology or revenge. I just wanted to close a cycle, for them to know who I was now, and that, from that point on, anyone who wanted to be a part of my life would have to accept that the failed Thomas from college was no more. I was the man who had fallen, gotten back up, and won. My way. I returned home that night with a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. Relief that I'd said everything I needed to, that I'd made it clear that I was no longer the son begging for approval. But there was also an emptiness, the realization that maybe they would never truly understand me, and despite everything, it still hurt. I'd spent so long trying to prove myself that when I finally did, I realized it wasn't their approval I needed. What I truly sought was to feel whole, independent of what anyone thought. And it was only that night, in the silence of my room, staring at the contracts on the table, that I realized I'd already achieved this long ago. I just hadn't realized it. In the days that followed, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. I began telling my story to a few close people, friends who had been by my side, even when I disappeared for weeks at a time working. Each time I spoke, I felt like I was closing another wound. And that's how the idea of writing a little about all this online came about. At first, I thought of a quick post, just to share with anyone going through something similar. But when I started writing, I realized how much had been bottled up inside me. The shame, the anger, the fear, it all needed to come out, not to get likes, but to transform that pain into something useful. I no longer wanted to hide who I was. On the contrary, I wanted to show that sometimes what seems like a failure is just the beginning of an extraordinary turnaround. Messages started arriving days after I published the text. Strangers said they saw themselves in my story, that they were going through similar dilemmas, that they also felt suffocated by other people's expectations. And that's when I realized my experience wasn't just mine. There was a silent pattern of pain, pressure, and fear of disappointment. I was moved reading each comment, each outpouring of confidence that someone felt comfortable sharing with me. It all gave me a new purpose. For the first time, I felt I could use my journey, full of stumbles and twists and turns, to serve as inspiration. And that, to me, was even more valuable than the millions I received from selling the startup. Of course, not everything was perfect. I still had moments of doubt, insecurity, and unanswered questions. My parents are still distant, and the relationship is far from ideal, but today I can look at them with more compassion. I know they did the best they could with what they had. Most importantly, I finally stopped expecting their love to come with automatic acceptance of my choices. I learned that sometimes we need to be the first to accept ourselves, even when it means disappointing others. Because at the end of the day, the only life we have to live is our own, and I chose to live mine fully, even if it cost me some pain along the way. Today, at 30, I look back and see a Thomas who was suffocating, trying to fit into a frame never meant for him. A young man who needed to fail in the eyes of others to finally see himself clearly. Sometimes, freedom comes disguised as a fall, and that's exactly what my journey taught me. The fall was painful, yes, but it was in it that I found strength. The strength to stand by my decisions, to get back up when shame threatened to paralyze me, and above all, to start over, even when everything seemed to be falling apart. My startup didn't define me, just as my parents' rejection didn't either. What defines me is the path I've taken, with all its bumps, turns, and potholes, and the way I chose to keep going even when everything seemed lost. Overcoming obstacles didn't come as a trophy, but as small daily victories. The day I didn't cry, the day I slept peacefully, the day I believed I deserved to be happy. These moments built a new version of me, stronger, more aware, more whole. Today, I continue to face challenges because life doesn't stop, and it shouldn't. But now I have tools. I'm clear about what moves me, what drains me, and most importantly, what nourishes me from within. I no longer seek approval where I know I won't receive it. My relationship with my parents is still distant, but I no longer carry the guilt for it. I've understood that there are things that don't depend solely on me, and that's okay. What does depend, I take care of with love and responsibility, especially with myself. If I could leave a message for anyone reading this right now, it would be, sometimes the greatest proof of self-love is having the courage to disappoint others' expectations, to honor your truth. It may hurt. It will hurt. But in the future, when you look at yourself honestly, you'll understand that there's no greater pain than abandoning yourself, and there's also no greater freedom than finding yourself whole again. I'm Thomas, and this is my story, not of instant success, but of true rebuilding. And I'm moving forward, one step at a time.